In February 2019, inside Airbus's final assembly line in Toulouse, production workers gathered for what felt like a funeral. The last orders for the world's largest passenger jet, the Airbus A380, had just been canceled. Emirates, its biggest customer, had cut back its commitments. Airbus CEO Tom Enders confirmed what everyone suspected: the program was over. The superjumbo era had officially ended. Around the world, airlines were retiring their fleets early. Air France parked theirs in storage. Singapore Airlines scrapped its first A380s after barely a decade in service. Lufthansa quietly removed theirs from future schedules. The logic was simple. The A380 was too big, too heavy, and too expensive for a market shifting toward smaller, fuel-efficient twins. And yet, one airline refused to let go. While others were sending their double-deckers to the scrapyard, Emirates was asking Airbus to build more, even offering to fund an upgraded version with new engines. To most of the industry, it looked like madness. But to Emirates, it made perfect sense. It was about numbers, routes, and a hub built to move the world through one city, Dubai. And to understand why Emirates still flies the A380, long after everyone else gave up on it, we need to go back to the beginning, to the moment Airbus set out to build a plane that was too big to fail. In the late 1980s, one aircraft defined long-haul travel: the Boeing 747. It had carried astronauts, presidents, and millions of passengers across continents since its debut in 1970. Every major airline wanted one. By the end of the decade, Boeing had delivered more than 900 of them. For Airbus, that was a problem. The European consortium, formed just 2 decades earlier from manufacturers in France, Germany, Spain, and the UK, had carved out success with smaller jets like the A300 and A320. But in the skies above, the 747 ruled unchallenged. Airbus executives, led by Jean Pearson and later Noël Forgeard, saw that dominance as unfinished business. In 1988, Airbus engineers began quietly studying an idea called the A3XX, a concept for a jet that would outclass the 747 in every measurable way. The goal was audacious: build the largest, most advanced passenger aircraft in history, something capable of carrying more than 800 passengers in all-economy configuration, or around 550 in a typical 3-class layout. It was about solving a problem. Major airports, London Heathrow, Tokyo Narita, New York JFK, were already operating near capacity. Airlines couldn't add more flights, so the only way to move more people was to fly bigger aircraft. Airbus projected that by 2020, the world would need over 1,200 very large airliners to keep up with passenger demand. The data seemed convincing, and by the mid-1990s, Airbus began showing early models of the A3XX to potential customers. Singapore Airlines, British Airways, Qantas, and Emirates were among the first to show interest. Boeing, meanwhile, dismissed the project publicly, calling it a niche fantasy. But behind the scenes, even they studied a counterproposal: the 747X, a stretched and modernized version of their icon. By 1999, Airbus had done enough market analysis to commit. The A3XX would become the A380, a name chosen to signify a new generation, with 8 symbolizing the double-deck cross-section. On December 19, 2000, Airbus officially launched the A380 program. The development cost? Nearly $10.7 billion, the most expensive commercial aircraft project in history at the time. It was backed by loans and subsidies from European governments and orders from launch customers like Singapore Airlines, Emirates, Air France, and Qantas. To build the A380, Airbus had to rethink how aircraft were made. The pieces were too large for existing factories, too heavy for normal transport. The wings were built in Broughton, UK, the fuselage sections in Hamburg, Germany, the tail in Spain, and the cockpit and nose in France. Each part was shipped by sea and road to Toulouse, where the final assembly line was built from scratch. The logistics alone looked like a global relay race. Entire roads were widened, bridges were reinforced. Airbus even developed a custom fleet of barges and trucks called the itinéraire à grand gabarit, the oversized route, just to move the components from coastlines to Toulouse. Inside the factories, the challenge was even tougher. The A380 contained over 500 kilometers of wiring. connecting everything from cabin lighting to flight control systems. When the French and German teams used different versions of CATIA design software, the wiring models didn't align. Miles of cables had to be redone by hand. The delays started stacking up. By 2006, the program was running more than 2 years late, and development costs had surged from $10 billion to over $25 billion. Airbus's parent company, EADS, saw its stock price plunge. CEO Noël Forgeard and Airbus head Gustav Humbert both resigned amid the fallout. But the engineers pressed on. On January 18, 2005, under the bright lights of Toulouse, the first A380, MSN 001, rolled out of the hangar. Painted in white and blue, it stood over 24 meters tall, with a wingspan of 79.8 meters and a maximum takeoff weight of 1.2 million pounds. Just over 3 months later, on April 27, 2005, the A380 took to the skies for the first time. It lifted off smoothly, almost silently for its size, and climbed over southern France as thousands watched from below. After 3 hours and 54 minutes, it landed back at Toulouse. The superjumbo had finally flown. But even as it did, airlines were growing uncertain. Oil prices were rising, and low-cost carriers were reshaping short-haul travel. Some airlines questioned whether passengers still wanted to move through crowded hub airports to board massive planes. The A380's biggest problem wasn't engineering. It was the way people traveled. When it entered service with Singapore Airlines on October 25, 2007, the A380 wasn't just a plane, it was an experience. Inside, the cabin was whisper quiet. The air pressure was set lower than any aircraft before it, reducing fatigue on long-haul flights. Even in economy, passengers noticed how calm it felt. The vibration, the engine noise, the cabin temperature, all smoother than anything they'd flown before. The A380 could be configured to carry over 800 passengers, though most airlines kept it between 450 and 520 seats for comfort and space. And then there was Emirates, the airline that turned the A380 into a flying hotel. First-class suites with closing doors, a bar and lounge at 40,000 feet, a shower spa with heated floors and full water pressure. Each A380 became a symbol of excess, from the gold trim to the onboard mood lighting. It could haul 85,000 pounds of cargo while crossing oceans nonstop. Passengers loved it. Airlines didn't. Despite its elegance, the A380 was expensive to operate. It required special double-deck jet bridges, reinforced taxiways, and longer runways. Filling 500 seats on every flight wasn't easy. For many airlines, smaller twin-engine jet made far more financial sense. By the early 2010s, carriers like Air France, Qantas, and Lufthansa began scaling back their orders. Airbus reduced production rates. But in Dubai, one airline was seeing something entirely different, because while others saw a problem, Emirates saw an opportunity. For Emirates, the A380 was the centerpiece of an entire strategy. Under the leadership of Sir Tim Clark, Emirates ordered 123 A380s, more than half of all the aircraft ever built. While other airlines were retreating, Emirates was doubling down. Their model was simple but radical. Instead of flying smaller jets point to point, they would funnel the world's long-haul traffic through Dubai International Airport, one central hub connecting Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. The A380 made that model work. Its massive capacity meant lower cost per seat, and Dubai's location allowed Emirates to connect nearly any 2 major cities with a single stop. And there was another advantage: bilateral restrictions. While other airlines were limited by agreements between countries, Emirates used its A380 fleet to dominate routes that others couldn't match in volume or luxury. From Sydney to London, New York to Bangkok, Dubai to Los Angeles, the A380 became a flying billboard for the Emirates brand. Gold accents, Arabic calligraphy, and the tail fin's red and green curve became instantly recognizable. By 2014, Emirates was operating the world's largest A380 fleet, carrying tens of millions of passengers a year. For Dubai, it was a statement of ambition. The A380 became the backbone of the Emirates identity. Global scale, long-haul dominance, and an experience no other carrier could match. But even as Emirates thrived, the rest of the industry was moving in a very different direction, one that would eventually seal the fate of the A380 program. By the early 2010s, aviation had shifted. The very world the A380 was built for, full of crowded hubs and booming demand for big jets, was changing fast. New long-range twinjets like the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which entered service in 2011, and the Airbus A350, which followed in 2015, changed the math completely. These aircraft could fly the same distances as the A380, but with just 2 engines, fewer passengers, and far lower operating costs. The airlines loved it. Passengers did too. People no longer needed to pass through hub airports like Heathrow or Dubai. They could fly directly between smaller cities, what the industry called point-to-point travel. The shift was clear. Fuel prices rose after 2010, and global travel demand plateaued. Filling an 800-seat jet became a risk most airlines weren't willing to take. Even major carriers like Lufthansa, Qantas, and Air France started phasing out their A380s. The airports had done their part. Expanded gates, reinforced taxiways, double-deck jet bridges, but the passengers never filled them. The A380 was a marvel of engineering, but a nightmare for scheduling and economics. By 2019, Airbus made the decision official. After producing just 251 units, the company announced the end of the A380 program. The last aircraft would roll off the line in 2021. Still, Emirates wasn't ready to let it go. Sir Tim Clark pushed Airbus to consider a Neo version, new engine option, that would extend range, cut fuel burn, and give the jet a second life. He pledged to buy 50 more aircraft if Airbus agreed. But Airbus said no. The market had moved on. In early 2020, global air travel collapsed almost overnight. The A380, with its size and costs, was among the first to be grounded. Carriers like Qantas, Air France, and Lufthansa mothballed theirs indefinitely. Some went straight to dismantling yards in Spain and France. But Emirates did something different. They parked their A380s, but didn't abandon them. Every few weeks, maintenance crews ran the engines, cycled the hydraulics, and kept the interiors pristine. While most airlines wrote off the A380 as obsolete, Emirates was preparing for a future others didn't yet see. By 2022, that future arrived. Passenger demand surged back faster than anyone predicted. Long-haul routes filled up again. Suddenly, the A380, once considered too big, became the perfect aircraft for the moment. Dubai-London, Dubai-Sydney, Dubai-New York. On routes with explosive post-pandemic demand, the A380 returned as the most efficient way to move thousands of passengers per day. By 2023, Emirates had reactivated more than 80 A380s, giving them a second life well into the 2030s and possibly beyond. Even Airbus engineers later admitted it. One said, without Emirates, the A380 would have vanished.